Welcome to tonight's story, where we'll journey together into a world of wonder and mystery. As you settle in, take a deep breath and allow the day's worries to melt away. Let the gentle rhythm of the story guide you into a peaceful state of relaxation. Tonight, we'll follow Princess Elara as she embarks on a quest filled with ancient secrets and magical discoveries. Close your eyes, let your mind drift, and allow the soothing sound of the tale to carry you into a restful sleep. The adventure is just beginning, and soon you'll be wrapped in the comfort of a dream. Sweet dreams await. Chapter 1. The Whisper of Destiny. Princess Elara wandered through the overgrown paths of the palace's forgotten garden, a place where nature had reclaimed its dominance. Vines crept along the stone walls, and wildflowers burst from the cracks in the ancient pathways. It was a garden long neglected, much like the kingdom it belonged to. A kingdom that had once flourished but was now fading, its prosperity dwindling like the setting sun. Elara often came here to escape the burdens of her royal duties, seeking solace in the silence. On this particular day, her footsteps led her to a secluded corner, a place she had never ventured before. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay. Yet something beneath the soil seemed to beckon her. Curious, Elara knelt down and brushed away the layers of dirt and leaves. Her fingers struck something hard, and as she dug deeper, she uncovered the edges of an ornate chest. The chest was unlike anything she had seen before. It was small, barely larger than a jewelry box, yet its craftsmanship was exquisite. Carved from dark wood, its surface was adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move under her gaze. Gold inlays traced the design of a tree, its roots intertwining with the borders of the chest, while its branches reached toward a crescent moon engraved at the top. The metal latch was cold to the touch, and though it was old, it showed no signs of rust or wear. Elara's heart raced with anticipation. There was an undeniable magic about this chest, something ancient and powerful. She carefully pried it open, but inside, she found nothing but darkness. Disappointed, she considered leaving it there, thinking it merely an empty relic of the past. Yet as she began to close the lid, a faint whisper caught her ear. At first, she thought it was the wind, a trick of the mind in this eerie place. But the whisper grew louder, more distinct, like the murmur of distant voices carried on a breeze. It was a language she did not understand, yet the tone was unmistakably urgent. The words wrapped around her like a spell, drawing her deeper into their mystery. Fascinated, Elara lifted the chest and cradled it in her arms. As she held it closer, the whispers became clearer, though still elusive. They seemed to promise something that her kingdom desperately needed. She felt a strange connection to the chest, as if it had been waiting for her, hidden beneath the earth until the right moment. That night, back in her chambers, Elara placed the chest on a table beside her bed. The whispers had subsided, but their memory lingered in her mind, haunting her thoughts. Unable to sleep, she stared at the chest, wondering what secrets it held. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. Elara sat up, her heart pounding. The chest, now bathed in the silver light of the moon, seemed to pulse with life. The whispers spoke of an artifact, a long-lost treasure that held the key to her kingdom's revival. The artifact, known as the Heart of the Land, was hidden somewhere far beyond the palace walls, buried in the depths of a perilous journey. The whispers hinted at the power of the Heart of the Land, a magic so ancient that it had been forgotten by all but a few. It could bring life back to the withering crops, fill the rivers with fresh water, and restore the vitality of the people. But the journey to find it would be fraught with danger, challenges that only the worthy could overcome. Elara's resolve hardened. She knew that this was not a coincidence. The chest had found her for a reason, and she could not ignore its call. The fate of her kingdom rested in her hands, and she would do whatever it took to uncover the secrets of the whispering chest. With a deep breath, Elara made her decision. At dawn, she would seek the counsel of the kingdom's scholars, for the first whispers had revealed a riddle she could not solve alone. The journey was about to begin, and with it, the destiny of a princess who would risk everything to save her people. At the break of dawn, Princess Elara was already awake, the weight of the previous night's revelations pressing on her mind. She stood by the large windows of her chambers, watching the first light of morning spread across the kingdom. The sight was beautiful, yet it did little to ease the turmoil in her heart. The chest, now resting silently on a pedestal, seemed ordinary in the daylight, its mysteries hidden beneath its wooden lid. But Elara knew better. She had heard the whispers, and they were not the idle musings of a restless mind. Determined to decipher the cryptic message, Elara dressed quickly and made her way to the palace's grand library, a place where the knowledge of generations was stored within ancient tomes and scrolls. The scholars who tended to the library were some of the wisest minds in the kingdom, and if anyone could help her understand the chest's whispers, it would be them. As Elara entered the library, the smell of aged parchment and leather greeted her. Tall shelves, laden with books, loomed over her, casting long shadows in the dim morning light. The head scholar, Master Orlin, was already at his desk, poring over a large manuscript. He was an elderly man with a long silver beard and sharp eyes that had seen many mysteries solved. When he looked up and saw the princess approaching, he rose and bowed respectfully. "Your Highness," Master Orlin greeted her. "To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit at such an early hour?" Elara returned the bow with a nod and quickly explained the events of the previous night. She described the discovery of the chest, its whispers, and the riddle that had eluded her understanding. Master Orlin listened intently, his expression growing more serious as she spoke. When she finished, he took a deep breath and motioned for her to follow him. "This is most intriguing, Princess," he said as they walked through the maze of shelves. "The chest you describe, it sounds like something from the old legends. Tales of enchanted objects that choose their bearers and reveal themselves only when the time is right." Elara's curiosity grew with every word. "Do you know what the whispers might mean?" They spoke of an artifact, the heart of the land, and a journey to find it. Master Orlin nodded gravely. The heart of the land is a legend older than the kingdom itself. It is said to be a relic of immense power, created by the gods to sustain the land's fertility and abundance. But it was lost ages ago during a time of great strife. If the chest is guiding you to it, then your quest is of the utmost importance. They arrived at a secluded alcove where a single massive book rested on a pedestal. The book's cover was worn and faded, its pages brittle with age. Master Orlin opened it carefully, revealing ancient scripts and illustrations that seemed to shimmer with a faint, otherworldly light. "This," he said, "is the Codex of Whispers. It contains knowledge of enchanted objects and the languages they speak. If your chest truly whispered to you, then its language may be recorded here." Elara watched as Master Orlin flipped through the pages, his fingers gliding over the delicate parchment. He paused at a page filled with symbols and strange letters, all of which seemed to dance across the paper as if alive. The scholar traced one of the symbols with his finger, muttering words in a tongue Elara did not recognize. As he did, the symbols began to shift, arranging themselves into a coherent phrase. "The chest has revealed the first clue," Master Orlin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It speaks of a forgotten map hidden deep within the palace, a map that will lead you to the heart of the land. But beware, Princess, for the path is perilous, and only those with true purpose can follow it." Elara's heart quickened. The idea of a map hidden within the palace itself was both thrilling and daunting. She had walked these halls her entire life, yet there were secrets she had never imagined. "Where do I begin?" she asked, her voice filled with resolve. Master Orlin closed the Codex of Whispers and looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. "The chest will guide you, Princess. Trust in its whispers and trust in yourself. But know this, once you start down this path, there will be no turning back. The fate of the kingdom may well rest on your shoulders." Elara nodded, fully aware of the gravity of his words. The whispering chest had set her on a journey, one that would take her far beyond the safety of the palace walls. But she would not falter. With the first clue in hand, she was ready to uncover the map and begin her quest for the heart of the land, the artifact that could save her kingdom from despair. The palace had always been a place of opulence and grandeur, its halls adorned with tapestries depicting the kingdom's storied history, its corridors echoing with the footsteps of nobles and servants alike. But beneath the veneer of luxury lay secrets hidden in the shadows of time, secrets that Princess Elara now sought with a determination that surprised even herself. The chest's whispers had led her to this moment, and she could feel the weight of destiny pressing upon her. Guided by the cryptic instructions Master Orlin had deciphered, Elara began her search in the oldest wing of the palace, a place rarely visited by anyone but the most diligent historians. The wing was filled with rooms long forgotten, their doors sealed shut and their contents left to gather dust. Here, in the silence of history, Elara believed she would find the map that held the key to her kingdom's salvation. With each step, the whispers from the chest grew louder, their words now forming distinct sentences in the ancient tongue that had once been a mystery to her. The chest had begun to teach her its language, and though she understood only fragments, the meaning was clear. The map was near, hidden within a chamber that had been sealed for generations. Elara's footsteps echoed in the dimly lit corridor as she approached a door at the far end of the hall. The wood was old and splintered, its iron handle cold and rusted. The door bore the insignia of a forgotten king, a ruler who had presided over the kingdom during a time of great prosperity. This, Elara realized, was the chamber she sought, the resting place of the map. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the handle. The whispers urged her on, filling her with a strange sense of urgency and anticipation. With a deep breath, she grasped the handle and pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, protesting the intrusion, but finally gave way, revealing a room shrouded in darkness. Elara stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with the smell of old parchment and stale air, and dust motes danced in the faint beam of light that filtered through a small, cracked window. The room was filled with shelves, each lined with scrolls and books that had not been touched in decades. In the center of the room stood a large table, and upon it lay a single scroll, rolled up and bound with a strip of faded red ribbon. The chest, still clutched in Elara's arms, hummed with excitement, its whispers now a chorus of encouragement. She approached the table and carefully unrolled the scroll. As the parchment unfurled, Elara's breath caught in her throat. The map was unlike anything she had ever seen. Drawn in exquisite detail, the map depicted the kingdom and the lands beyond it, but with a depth and complexity that went beyond mere geography. It showed not just the physical landscape, but also the hidden currents of magic that flowed through the earth, the ancient ley lines that connected places of power, and the locations of long-forgotten temples and shrines. At the center of the map, marked with the symbol of a heart entwined with vines, was the location of the heart of the land, but the path to the artifact was far from straightforward. The map was filled with riddles and symbols that seemed to shift and change as Elara studied them. It was a living document, one that required the reader to be as much a part of the journey as the terrain it depicted. Elara realized that this was no ordinary map. It was a test, one that would challenge her at every step. As she continued to examine the map, the whispers from the chest began to change, offering guidance on how to interpret the shifting symbols. The first destination was clear. The journey would begin in the dark and mystical forest that bordered the kingdom, a place filled with ancient magic and creatures that were as old as the land itself. It was a place of both danger and wonder, and Elara knew that it would be the first of many trials she would face. With the map in hand and the chest by her side, Elara left the chamber, her mind racing with the possibilities and perils that lay ahead. She knew that the journey would be long and fraught with challenges, but she also knew that she had no choice. The whispers had set her on a path that could not be ignored, and she would see it through, no matter the cost. As she made her way back to her chambers, Elara felt a sense of resolve harden within her. She was not just a princess now. She was a seeker, a bearer of destiny. The heart of the land awaited her, and with it, the future of her kingdom. The journey had begun. The sun had barely risen when Princess Elara stood at the edge of the dark and mystical forest, her heart a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The towering trees before her were ancient, their twisted roots disappearing into the earth like the fingers of some great sleeping giant. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp leaves, and the sound of birdsong was distant and muffled, as though the forest itself guarded its secrets jealously. Elara clutched the map tightly in one hand and the whispering chest in the other. The chest had grown quiet since they left the palace, its whispers now faint murmurs that seemed to blend with the rustling of the leaves. She knew the journey ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, but the determination in her heart was unwavering. The heart of the land was out there, somewhere deep within the forest, and she would find it, no matter the cost. Before entering the forest, Elara had taken the precaution of arming herself with the knowledge she had gleaned from Master Orlan and the palace scholars. She knew the forest was a place of powerful magic, where the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural blurred. Stories of travelers who had entered the forest and never returned were common, their fates lost to the shadows of time. But Elara was different. She had the chest's guidance, and she carried within her the hopes of an entire kingdom. As she took her first steps into the forest, the canopy above closed in, blocking out the morning light and casting the world around her in shades of green and gold. The forest seemed alive with a presence that was both welcoming and menacing, as if it recognized her purpose, but was not yet convinced of her worthiness. The path before her was narrow, barely more than a game trail, winding deeper into the heart of the forest. The chest began to hum softly, its whispers guiding her forward. It was then that she heard a voice, not from the chest, but from the forest itself. "Princess Elara," the voice called, soft and melodic, yet tinged with an otherworldly echo. Elara stopped in her tracks, her hand instinctively reaching for the dagger at her belt. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, carried on the breeze that rustled the leaves around her. "Who's there?" Elara demanded, trying to steady her breath. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and clad in forest green garb, blending seamlessly with the surroundings. He was a ranger, his features sharp and his eyes keen, with hair as dark as the forest floor. He moved with a grace that spoke of years spent in the wild, and though he appeared young, there was an ageless quality about him. "My name is Kale," he said, bowing slightly. "I am the guardian of these woods, and I have been waiting for you." Elara's grip on her dagger relaxed, though she did not let her guard down completely. "Waiting for me? How could you know I would be here?" Kale smiled, a hint of mystery in his eyes. "The forest knows many things, Princess. It whispers to those who listen, just as your chest whispers to you. I have heard its call and have come to offer my aid. The path you seek is not one you should walk alone." Elara hesitated. She had not expected to find a companion on this journey, especially one so attuned to the forest's secrets. But the chest hummed in approval, as if sensing Kale's sincerity. And Elara knew she could not ignore this sign. "Very well, Kale," she said, her voice firm. "If the forest has chosen you to guide me, then I accept your help. But know this, my mission is of the utmost importance. There can be no distractions." Kale nodded, his expression serious. "I understand, Princess. The heart of the land is a treasure of unimaginable power, and the trials ahead will require all of our strength and wits. Together, we will face whatever lies in our path." With Kale at her side, Elara continued her journey deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around them, the path becoming more treacherous with every step. They encountered strange sights, flowers that glowed with an eerie light, streams that flowed with water as clear as crystal, yet carried an unnatural coldness, and creatures that watched them from the shadows with eyes that gleamed like stars. As the day wore on, the forest grew darker, the light filtering through the canopy becoming faint and scattered. Elara's resolve never wavered, but she knew that the true challenges were yet to come. The forest was only the beginning, and with Kale's guidance and the chest's whispers, she would face whatever dangers awaited. The journey had begun in earnest, and with it, the fate of the kingdom rested on Elara's shoulders. She would not fail. As Princess Elara and Kale ventured deeper into the heart of the mystical forest, the world around them grew increasingly strange and unfamiliar. The trees towered higher, their twisted branches intertwining like the arms of ancient giants. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, and the sounds of the forest became a symphony of whispers and rustlings, as though the very earth was alive and listening. The air grew cooler, and the light that filtered through the dense canopy above took on a greenish hue, casting everything in an otherworldly glow. Elara's steps slowed as she felt the presence of something powerful, something ancient, watching them from the depths of the forest. She glanced at Kale, who seemed unfazed, his eyes scanning their surroundings with the ease of one who was intimately familiar with these woods. The chest in Elara's arms began to hum once more, its whispers growing louder and more urgent. She could feel it vibrating slightly, as if warning her of the danger that lay ahead. Kale, noticing her unease, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We are close," he murmured, his voice barely more than a breath. "The guardian of the forest is near." Elara nodded, steeling herself for what was to come. The guardian, an entity she had heard of only in tales, was said to be the protector of the forest's deepest secrets, a spirit as old as the trees themselves. It was a being of immense power, capable of both great kindness and terrible wrath. To gain the guardian's trust was no small feat, and Elara knew that this encounter could determine the success or failure of her quest. The path before them narrowed into a tunnel of overhanging branches, the foliage so thick that it blotted out the sky entirely. As they stepped into the tunnel, the whispers of the chest became a low, resonant hum that seemed to echo through the very ground beneath their feet. Elara's heart pounded in her chest, each beat synchronized with the pulsing of the chest's magic. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a vast clearing, the contrast so sudden that Elara blinked in surprise. The clearing was bathed in soft ethereal light, and in its center stood a massive tree, its trunk as wide as a castle tower, and its roots spreading out like the legs of a giant spider. The tree's bark shimmered with a silver sheen, and its leaves glowed faintly as if filled with starlight. This was no ordinary tree. This was the heart of the forest, the dwelling place of the guardian. As Elara and Kale approached, the ground beneath them seemed to tremble, and from the base of the tree, a figure began to emerge. At first, it was difficult to discern its form, as it appeared to be made of the very essence of the forest. Leaves, bark, and earth woven together in a shape that was both human and otherworldly. The guardian's eyes, deep and green like the forest canopy, fixed on Elara with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Who dares to enter my domain?" The guardian's voice boomed, resonating through the clearing like a thunderclap. "Speak and state your purpose, or be cast out into the darkness." Elara took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. I am Princess Elara of the kingdom of Lysoria. I seek the heart of the land, the ancient artifact that holds the power to restore my kingdom's prosperity. The whispers of this chest have led me here, to you, the guardian of the forest. I humbly ask for your guidance and your blessing on my journey. The guardian's gaze shifted to the chest in Elara's arms, its expression unreadable. For a long moment there was silence, and Elara could feel the weight of the guardian's judgment upon her. Then slowly, the guardian extended a hand, its fingers elongated and gnarled like the branches of a tree. Show me the chest, the guardian commanded. Elara hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer, holding the chest out for the guardian to see. As the guardian's fingers brushed against the chest, the whispers ceased entirely, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that filled the clearing with a sense of calm and clarity. The chest has chosen you, princess, the guardian said, its voice now softer, more contemplative. And so, I shall allow you to continue your journey. But know this, the path ahead is fraught with danger, and only those with a pure heart and unwavering resolve will succeed. The heart of the land is a treasure of great power, but it must be claimed with wisdom and humility. The guardian's form began to dissolve back into the earth, its presence fading like mist in the morning sun. Go now, and may the forest guide and protect you, it whispered as it vanished completely. Elara stood in the clearing, the chest warm and silent in her arms, her heart filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The guardian had granted her passage, but the challenges that lay ahead would test her to the very core. With Kale by her side and the whispers of the chest to guide her, she would face whatever trials awaited in the next leg of her journey. The path forward was clear, and Elara was ready to follow it, no matter where it might lead. Chapter 2: The Trials of the Past. The forest's edge loomed behind Princess Elara and Kale as they stepped into a landscape vastly different from the one they had just traversed. The dense, verdant foliage gave way to an expanse of endless sand dunes, their golden peaks stretching as far as the eye could see. The sky above was a merciless, cloudless blue, the sun a blazing orb that beat down on them with an unforgiving intensity. This was the Desert of Echoes, a place where time seemed to stand still, and the very air shimmered with a heat that distorted reality. The chest, now quiet and still, rested in Elara's arms as she surveyed the desolate landscape. The whispers had guided her to this point, but now they offered no further guidance. She could feel the weight of the journey ahead pressing down on her like the sun's relentless rays. Kale stood beside her, his expression serious, though his presence was a comfort in this harsh and unforgiving land. The Desert of Echoes, Kale said, his voice low. A place where the past and present intertwine, where the sands remember every footstep that has ever crossed them. Many have entered this desert in search of answers, but few have returned. Elara nodded, her resolve unshaken. The map shows that we must cross this desert to reach the next stage of our journey. The heart of the land lies beyond, and I will not be deterred, no matter what trials await us here. With that, they began their trek across the shifting sands. Each step was a struggle, the ground beneath them constantly shifting, as if the desert itself sought to swallow them whole. The heat was oppressive, sapping their strength with every passing moment. Yet, it was not the physical challenge that weighed most heavily on Elara's mind. It was the strange sensation that they were not alone. As they pressed forward, the air around them began to thicken, and the whispers returned. Though now they were different. These were not the guiding whispers of the chest, but echoes, fragments of voices long past, carried on the wind, like the sands that swirled around them. The voices were faint at first, indistinguishable murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. But as they continued, the echoes grew louder, more distinct, forming words that chilled Elara to her core. Elara, the voices called, in tones that were both familiar and haunting. Remember us. Remember what was lost. Elara froze, her heart racing as the echoes filled her mind with images of the past. Visions of her ancestors, of great kings and queens who had ruled before her. She saw their triumphs and their failures, their joys and their sorrows. And she saw the moment when the heart of the land was lost, hidden away to protect it from those who would misuse its power. The echoes were a reminder of the weight of her lineage, of the responsibilities that came with her royal blood. But there was more to these echoes than mere memories. As they walked further into the desert, the visions began to change, becoming more personal, more insidious. Elara saw herself, alone and surrounded by darkness, her kingdom crumbling around her. She saw her people, suffering and despairing, their cries for help unanswered. The echoes whispered of failure, of doubt, of the possibility that she might not be strong enough to complete this journey, to save her kingdom. Do not listen to them, Kale said sharply, breaking through the haze of doubt that clouded her mind. He placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her in the present. The desert of echoes preys on your fears, your regrets. It shows you the worst of what could be. But they are only echoes, shadows of a future that has not yet come to pass. Elara took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. She knew Kale was right. The echoes were powerful, but they were not reality. They were meant to test her, to see if she would falter. But she would not allow herself to be swayed by them. She had come too far, and her people were counting on her. The heart of the land will not be claimed by doubt or fear, she said, her voice firm. I am the heir of Lysoria, and I will not be broken by these echoes. With renewed determination, Elara continued forward, Kale by her side. The echoes persisted, but now they seemed less daunting, their power diminished by her resolve. The sand still shifted beneath their feet, but they moved with purpose, following the faint glow of the chest's whispers that had once again begun to guide them. As they reached the far edge of the desert, the echoes faded into silence, the voices of the past falling away like dust in the wind. Before them, a new landscape awaited, the entrance to the cursed valley where even darker trials would test their strength. But Elara was ready. She had faced the echoes of her past, and now she would face whatever challenges the future had in store. Beyond the scorching sands of the desert of echoes, Princess Elara and Kale found themselves standing at the threshold of the cursed valley. The transition from the barren desert to this shadowy gorge was abrupt, as if they had crossed into a different realm entirely. The air here was thick with an unnatural chill, and the sky above was a perpetually grey shroud, casting the valley in a dim, eerie light. The entrance to the valley was marked by two towering stone pillars, each carved with ancient runes that pulsed with a faint, ominous glow. The valley itself was a narrow passage between sheer cliffs, the walls of which were jagged and treacherous. A narrow path wound its way through the valley, disappearing into the murky gloom ahead. Kale's expression was grim as he studied the entrance. "The cursed valley," he said quietly. "Few who enter this place ever return. The shadows here are more than just the absence of light. They are the remnants of those who came before us, consumed by their own fears and desires." Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. The whispers from the chest were faint, almost inaudible, as if even the ancient magic that guided her was reluctant to enter this place. But she knew she had no choice. The heart of the land lay beyond, and the only way to reach it was through the cursed valley. With a deep breath, Elara stepped forward, the chest clutched tightly in her arms. Kale followed closely behind, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, ready to defend them against whatever dangers might lurk in the shadows. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for them to walk side by side, and the ground beneath their feet was uneven, littered with loose stones that threatened to trip them with every step. As they ventured deeper into the valley, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft crunch of gravel underfoot, and the occasional distant rumble of rocks shifting on the cliffs above. It was as if the valley itself was alive, watching them, waiting for them to falter. And then the shadows began to move. Elara's breath caught as she saw them. Dark, shifting forms that slithered along the valley walls, their shapes indistinct and fluid. They moved like smoke, coiling and uncoiling in the corners of her vision, always just out of focus. The whispers in her mind returned, but these were different from the ones she had heard before. These were sinister, mocking, filled with malice and despair. "You will never succeed," the shadows whispered, their voices like a chorus of the damned. "Turn back now, princess, before it's too late. This valley will be your tomb, just as it was for those who came before you." Elara felt the cold fingers of doubt creeping into her heart, but she forced herself to push forward. "They're only shadows," she muttered to herself, though the fear that clutched at her heart made the words feel hollow. "They can't harm me." But as they continued, the shadows grew bolder, their forms becoming more distinct. Faces began to emerge from the darkness, twisted, tormented visages of those who had perished in the valley long ago. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and their mouths twisted into cruel smiles as they reached out with shadowy hands, their fingers like tendrils of black mist. Kale drew his sword, the blade gleaming in the dim light. "Stay close, Elara," he warned, his voice tense. "These shadows may not be real, but they can still harm us if we let them." Elara nodded, her grip tightening on the chest. The whispers from within it grew louder, a beacon of hope in the midst of the encroaching darkness. She focused on the chest, drawing strength from its magic, and felt a surge of determination. "I will not be swayed by illusions," she declared, her voice echoing through the valley. "The heart of the land is my goal, and no shadow will stand in my way." The shadows recoiled at her words, hissing like a nest of vipers. But they did not retreat entirely. Instead, they pressed closer, their forms shifting and writhing as if testing her resolve. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and the path ahead began to crumble, the stones collapsing into a yawning chasm that seemed to open up from the very depths of the earth. Elara and Kale barely managed to leap back in time, the ground giving way just inches from their feet. "Forward!" Kale shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We have to keep moving!" With no other choice, Elara followed Kale's lead, their pace quickening as they navigated the crumbling path. The shadows pursued them relentlessly, but Elara refused to look back. She could feel the weight of their hatred pressing down on her, but she would not give in. At last, they reached the end of the valley, where the path opened into a wider clearing, the shadows receding as if afraid to follow them further. Before them stood the entrance to a dark cave, the next stage of their journey. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, but Elara knew that this was where they needed to go. The cursed valley had tested them, but they had survived. Now, only the unknown lay ahead, and with it, the final leg of their quest. Elara took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever awaited them in the darkness of the cave. She was ready. The entrance to the cave loomed before Princess Elara and Kale, like the gaping maw of a great beast, its darkness impenetrable and foreboding. The air around them was thick with moisture, and the faint sound of water echoed from within, a steady rhythmic pulse that seemed to resonate with the beating of Elara's heart. She knew that this cave marked the beginning of the next trial, the river of reflection, a place where the very soul was laid bare, and where the truth, no matter how painful, could not be avoided. With Kale by her side, Elara stepped into the cave, the darkness swallowing them whole. The light from the entrance quickly faded, leaving only the dim glow of their torches to guide them. The cave walls were slick with moisture, and the ground beneath their feet was uneven, covered in stones that shifted treacherously with every step. As they ventured deeper, the sound of the river grew louder, a soft melodic rush that filled the cavern with its presence. The whispers from the chest had fallen silent, as if waiting for something. Some revelation that Elara would have to face on her own. She could feel the tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that made her pulse quicken. At last, they reached the heart of the cave, where the river of reflection flowed in a wide, slow-moving stream. The water was clear, almost unnaturally so, and its surface was as smooth as glass, reflecting the dim light of their torches like a mirror. The river wound its way through the cavern, disappearing into the darkness at either end, as if it had no beginning and no end. Kale stopped at the river's edge, his expression solemn. "This is the river of reflection," he said quietly. "It is said that those who look into its waters will see the truth of their souls, their greatest strengths, and their deepest fears. Many have been broken by what they saw here." Elara stared at the water, her reflection staring back at her, but she did not yet look deeply. She knew what awaited her, an encounter with her own fears, doubts, and the burdens she had carried since the beginning of this journey. The whispers of the chest had guided her to this point, but now she would have to face the river alone. "I must cross this river," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "The heart of the land lies on the other side, and I will not turn back now." Kale nodded, though his eyes were filled with concern. "I cannot follow you across, Princess. This trial is yours alone. But know that I will be here, waiting for you when you return." Elara gave him a grateful nod before turning back to the river. She took a deep breath, then knelt at the water's edge, peering into the depths. The river's surface rippled slightly as she leaned closer, and the reflection of her face began to change. At first, she saw herself as she was, Princess Elara, heir to the throne of Lysoria, a leader determined to save her kingdom. But as she continued to gaze, the reflection shifted, revealing a younger version of herself, a child, lost and uncertain, burdened by the expectations placed upon her. The child's eyes were wide with fear, and Elara felt a pang of sadness as she remembered the loneliness she had felt growing up, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her even then. The water rippled again, and the reflection changed once more. This time she saw herself as she had been just before the journey began, standing before the crumbling palace, watching as her people struggled to survive in a land that was slowly dying. The guilt and helplessness she had felt in that moment surged back, overwhelming her with a sense of failure. She had been unable to save them then. What made her think she could save them now? The river's surface shimmered, and the reflection changed yet again. Now she saw a vision of the future, a future in which she failed to find the heart of the land, in which the kingdom withered and died, and she was left standing alone in a barren wasteland, her people's cries echoing in her ears. Elara gasped, tears welling in her eyes. The fear and doubt that had plagued her throughout the journey now threatened to consume her, to drag her down into the depths of despair. But as she gazed into the water, a new reflection appeared, one that was neither past nor future, but a vision of herself as she could be. In this reflection, Elara stood tall and proud, the heart of the land in her hand, its magic flowing through her and into the earth, revitalizing the kingdom. Her people flourished, the land was green and abundant, and she was no longer alone. She was surrounded by those she loved, those who had stood by her, and she knew that she had done what was right, what was needed. The vision filled her with hope, and she felt the strength within her rising, pushing back the fear and doubt. She was more than her past mistakes, more than the burdens she carried. She was Elara, the rightful heir to the throne, and she would not be broken by this trial. With renewed determination, Elara rose to her feet. The river's reflections faded as she stepped into the water, its cool touch a reminder of the truth she had just faced. She waded through the river, each step bringing her closer to the other side, to the next stage of her journey. As she emerged from the water, the whispers from the chest returned, stronger than before, guiding her forward. Kale was waiting for her on the opposite bank, a look of relief and pride in his eyes. "You faced the river and emerged stronger," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "The heart of the land is closer now, Princess. You are ready." Elara nodded, her heart lightened by the truth she had seen. The trials had tested her, but she had proven her strength, her resolve. The journey was not over, but she knew now that she could face whatever lay ahead. The path was clear, and she would follow it to the end. Princess Elara stood at the entrance to the hidden chamber, the final barrier between her and the heart of the land. The cave had led them deeper into the earth, through narrow passageways and across treacherous ledges, until at last they had arrived at a massive stone door carved with ancient symbols. These symbols, worn by time, still pulsed faintly with the magic that had guarded the heart for centuries. The air here was dense with the weight of forgotten secrets, and the whispers from the chest were now a steady hum, urging her forward. Kyle, ever vigilant, stood by her side, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Though he had accompanied her through every trial, she knew that this chamber, like the river of reflection, would test her alone. The whispers had grown more intense, as if the chest itself knew that the moment of truth was at hand. "This is the final trial," Kale said quietly, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Whatever lies beyond this door, remember that you are not alone. You have the strength of your ancestors and the will of your people behind you." Elara nodded, drawing courage from his words. She reached out to touch the stone door, her fingers tracing the ancient runes. As she did, the door responded to her touch, the symbols glowing brighter as the magic within them awakened. Slowly, the door began to rumble, sliding open with a deep groan that reverberated through the cavern. Beyond the door lay the hidden chamber, a vast circular room that seemed to pulse with a light of its own. The walls were lined with more of the same ancient runes, each one glowing with a soft golden light. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it, resting in a bed of stone, was the heart of the land. The heart was a crystalline orb about the size of a man's fist, and it shimmered with an inner light that seemed to shift and change with every heartbeat. Elara could feel its power even from the doorway, a pulsing, vibrant energy that called to her, promising to restore the prosperity of her kingdom. But as she stepped closer, she noticed something else. The heart was surrounded by a ring of stone statues, each one depicting a figure from Lysoria's past. Great kings, queens, and warriors who had once ruled the land. Their faces were solemn, their eyes fixed on the heart, as if they were its eternal guardians. Elara recognized some of the figures from the histories she had studied, their legacies woven into the very fabric of her kingdom. As she approached the pedestal, the whispers from the chest grew louder, more urgent, warning her of the final trial that awaited. Elara knew instinctively that this was not simply a matter of taking the heart. There was a price to be paid, a choice to be made. Steeling herself, Elara placed the chest on the ground and approached the pedestal. The statues seemed to watch her every move, their stone eyes filled with the weight of their eternal vigil. When she was but a breath away from the heart, a voice echoed through the chamber, a voice that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. "Princess Elara," the voice intoned, deep and resonant, like the tolling of a distant bell. "You stand before the heart of the land, the source of your kingdom's prosperity and the key to its survival. But to claim this power, you must prove yourself worthy. You must choose." Elara's heart pounded as she listened to the voice, her mind racing. "What must I choose?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The voice continued, its tone unwavering. You must choose between the heart's power for yourself, to wield as you see fit, or to return it to the land where its magic will flow through the earth and revive your kingdom. But know this: if you choose to keep the heart's power, the land will wither, and the kingdom will be yours to rule in name only, a kingdom of ashes. Elara's breath caught in her throat. The choice was clear, yet impossibly difficult. The power of the heart was immense, a force that could grant her the ability to shape her kingdom as she wished. But the cost was unthinkable. To keep the heart's power for herself would mean the death of her people, the very ones she had set out to save. She closed her eyes, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. The visions from the river of reflection returned to her mind. The barren wasteland, the cries of her people, and the vision of herself as a leader who had brought life and hope back to her kingdom. She knew what she had to do. "I choose the land," Elara said, her voice firm. "I choose to return the heart's power to the earth, so that my people may live and prosper." The chamber fell silent, the voice echoing faintly as it repeated her words. Then the statues began to glow, their stone forms warming as if coming to life. The light from the heart intensified, filling the chamber with a brilliant radiance that nearly blinded her. "Elara of Lysoria," the voice said, now filled with a note of approval. "You have chosen wisely. The heart of the land shall be returned to its rightful place, and the magic that flows through it will renew your kingdom. You have proven yourself worthy." With that, the heart began to lift from the pedestal, hovering in the air as it pulsed with a powerful energy. Elara stepped back, shielding her eyes as the light from the heart grew brighter. The statues, now fully illuminated, seemed to nod in approval, their silent vigil at an end. The heart rose higher, its light spreading outwards until it enveloped the entire chamber. Elara felt a surge of energy rush through her, filling her with a sense of peace and fulfillment. The magic of the heart was no longer just a distant force. It was a part of her, a part of the land, a part of her people. As the light faded, the heart slowly descended back to the pedestal, its glow now soft and steady. The statues returned to their original state, their task complete. The chamber, once filled with tension, was now calm, a sacred place where a great choice had been made. Elara approached the heart once more, her hand reaching out to touch its smooth, crystalline surface. She felt its warmth beneath her fingers, a reminder of the power she had chosen to return to the earth. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. She knew that the journey was not yet over, but she also knew that she had passed the final test. The heart of the land was hers to safeguard, not to control. And with its magic restored, her kingdom would once again flourish, a testament to the strength and wisdom of its people. Elara turned to Kael, who had watched the entire trial with silent reverence. He met her gaze with a smile, his eyes filled with pride and respect. "The heart is where it belongs," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Now let us return to our people, and together we will rebuild our kingdom." With the heart of the land's magic now a part of her, Princess Elara led the way out of the hidden chamber, her steps light with the knowledge that she had fulfilled her destiny. The future of Lysoria was bright once more, and she would lead her people into that future with hope, wisdom, and the unyielding strength of the land itself. The journey back through the cave was marked by a sense of quiet triumph. Princess Elara, with the heart of the land safely nestled in her arms, felt a profound connection to the earth beneath her feet, as though the magic of the artifact had already begun to weave itself into the land. Kale walked beside her, his usual vigilance tempered by a quiet satisfaction. They had overcome the trials, and now the final leg of their journey awaited them, returning the heart to its rightful place within the kingdom. As they emerged from the cave, the landscape had changed. The once barren and hostile land outside the cursed valley now seemed softer, more inviting, as if the very earth had sensed the presence of the heart and begun to heal itself in anticipation. The oppressive grey sky had lightened, with beams of sunlight piercing through the clouds to bathe the land in warmth. It was as if the kingdom, long dormant, was waking from a deep slumber. Elara paused, gazing out over the horizon. The path home lay before them, but it was no longer shrouded in uncertainty. The chest, silent since she had made her choice in the hidden chamber, now rested peacefully in her satchel, its whispers no longer necessary. The magic it had carried was now within her, and she could feel its power coursing through her veins, guiding her steps. "We're close now," Kale said, his voice breaking the silence. "The heart is calling to the land. It knows its place." Elara nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "The kingdom is ready. It's time to bring the heart home." They made their way back to the palace, the journey swift and unhindered, as though the trials they had faced had been but a distant memory. Along the way, they began to notice signs of change. Small patches of green sprouting from the once dry earth, streams of clear water trickling where there had been none before. It was as if the land itself was celebrating the return of its lifeblood, the magic of the heart already working to restore its natural balance. As they neared the palace, word of their arrival spread quickly. The people who had once been despondent and fearful now gathered in the streets, their faces alight with hope. Elara could see the change in their eyes. Their despair had been replaced with something more powerful, a belief that their kingdom could once again thrive. They cheered as she passed, their voices rising in a chorus that echoed through the palace walls. "Elara! Elara!" they cried, their joy palpable. "The heart has returned! Our kingdom will live again!" Elara's heart swelled with emotion as she ascended the steps to the palace, Kale by her side. The weight of her journey, the trials she had faced, all seemed worth it in that moment. She had done what she had set out to do, not for herself, but for her people, for the land that had nurtured them for generations. And now, the heart would fulfill its promise, bringing prosperity and life back to Lysoria. Inside the palace, the grand hall had been prepared for the heart's return. The dais where the throne sat had been transformed into a place of ceremony, a bed of earth and stone awaiting the heart's placement. The royal advisors, the scholars, and even Master Orlin were present, their faces a mixture of reverence and awe. Elara approached the dais, her steps slow and deliberate. The heart of the land pulsed gently in her hands, its light growing brighter as it neared its resting place. She could feel the energy within it, a living force that connected her to everything around her. The earth, the sky, the people. It was a bond that transcended time, a reminder of the responsibility she bore as the guardian of this ancient power. She knelt before the dais, carefully placing the heart in the center of the prepared bed. As she did, the ground beneath her seemed to tremble, a soft rumble that spread through the hall and into the earth beyond. The heart settled into its place, and for a moment, all was still. Then, with a brilliant flash of light, the heart's magic erupted outward, a wave of energy that washed over the entire kingdom. Elara felt it pass through her, a warmth that filled her with a sense of peace and fulfillment. The light spread through the hall, out into the streets, across the fields and forests, revitalizing the land with each passing second. The barren fields outside the palace walls burst into bloom. Rivers flowed with crystal clear water, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of new life. The people outside the palace gasped in awe as the kingdom transformed before their eyes. Fields of crops that had once withered under the harsh sun now flourished, their green shoots stretching toward the sky. Trees that had been reduced to little more than skeletal remains were now full of life, their branches heavy with fruit. The rivers, long dry and cracked, now flowed freely, their waters clear and pure. Elara stood, her heart full of pride and gratitude. The kingdom of Lysoria had been reborn, and she had fulfilled her destiny. The heart of the land had returned to its rightful place, and with it, the prosperity of her people. As the light from the heart dimmed, settling into a steady, gentle glow, Elara turned to face her people. They looked at her with admiration and love, their faith in her unwavering. She knew that the journey had changed her, had made her into the leader her kingdom needed. And she was ready to guide them into a new era of peace and abundance. Kale stood beside her, his expression one of quiet pride. "You did it, Elara," he said softly. "The kingdom is yours to lead, and the heart will ensure that it thrives." Elara nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. We did it, Kale. The land, the people, all of us. We're in this together. The palace erupted in cheers, the sound echoing through the halls and out into the streets. The kingdom of Lysoria was alive once more, and its future was brighter than ever. Elara knew that there would be challenges ahead, but with the heart of the land at the center of it all, she had no doubt that they would overcome anything that came their way. And so, with the heart of the land restored, the kingdom of Lysoria entered a new age of prosperity. Its people united by a shared purpose and a renewed connection to the land they called home. Elara, now a queen in her own right, stood as a beacon of hope and strength, a leader who had proven that the greatest power of all was the courage to make the right choice, even when it meant sacrificing everything. The heart of the land pulsed gently within the palace, its magic flowing through the kingdom, a reminder of the bond between the people and the earth, a bond that would endure for generations to come. And Elara, with her people by her side, would lead them into a future filled with promise, a future where the land and its magic would continue to thrive.